Welcome to Season 6 of the Stories in the Cemetery podcast. This season, we're shaking things up a bit with deeper questions into the paranormal. And to do that, your host, Nicholas McGurr, has invited the owner of Amen Paranormal Research, Joshua Amen, to be his co-host. To learn more about their studies and articles, visit storiesinthecemetery.com, or you can check out the Paranormal Investigation Workbook or the Paranormal Investigator's Almanac, both available on Amazon. Stories in the Cemetery takes you ghost hunting in Charleston, South Carolina, and reveals his findings from those investigations here on the Stories in the Cemetery podcast. Let's get into today's episode with Nick and Josh.
All right, everybody. Welcome to Season 6, Episode 56. So this episode this week is really, I guess, out there. Like, this is an odd thing. Oh, sorry, everybody. My name is Nick. I'm your host from Stories in the Cemetery, and with me, I have my co-host,
Joshua Amen from Tales from a Ghost Center.
Welcome, Josh. You keep coming back, dude. Like, this is awesome. So, anyway, we're going to be discussing the theremin. Like, this is a jacked up situation. This is an idea that I came across. And I don't want to say it's an original idea, because I am never going to say that I have an original idea ever again. So Josh knows why I'm going to be doing that. So I'm going to say, like, this is a great, I guess, in theory, process that this could actually influence the paranormal field. But the theremin is a musical instrument, and you know, after talking with Josh and I'm trying to explain this thing to him, I don't do a very good job, which is odd because, I mean, I literally teach people how to use weird shit for a living. And this theremin idea, I'm just going to break right into the video. So instead of me trying to explain this, I am going to let Professor Ed Sussman explain this from his YouTube video where I captured the audio. So give this a listen, and we'll be right back after about 2 minutes.
Nothing comes close to what a theremin can do in the air without touching. And that's because I'm going to explain why. The theremin is a transmitting device. You have a volume loop here, which is an antenna. This is the volume side of your instrument. This is the pitch side, a pitch antenna, the pitch side. You know, the two coils, pitch and volume. Pitch is the sound. Volume, of course, is amplitude of the sound, high and low. Okay, it's exactly the same in newer technologies that create this theremin or any others that you see out there. Now, what we have is something that we are offering the theremin to make its music, and that is our own electricity. We have the ability to have capacitance, that is storing electric energy. And this instrument work exactly the same way. They use capacitance in their circuitry to release the electrons to make loud and soft music, high and low pitch. It's all affected by our presence around these antennas. And I'm going to show you a visualization of how this all works. Let me tune it in a little bit. Right here, we have a plasma plate. We have electrical energy of high intensity emitted from this plate. You probably have seen plasma globes, maybe yay big, and you put your hand on it, and the electricity goes to you. The same theory. You have electricity in your body, and it is excited by the electricity in your body. The antennas and the field around here are excited by my presence. So if I go into it, this is closer. If I go into Woody's field, this is what's going on. You can see visually exactly what's going on here. Okay? Okay? Put that in your head. That image going on here. That's how the theremin works. And how Lev figured this out, I don't know. A genius.
All right, we're back. So hopefully that explains a little bit about how the theremin works and why we might be so fascinated by this idea. Josh, you did some research over the past few days about the theremin. So why don't we get into the history and let us all know, like, where the hell did this idea even come from? An instrument you can't even touch in order to play it. So where the hell did it come from?
So the creator of the theremin, his name was Leon Theremin, and he was a Russian inventor and acoustics professor. And he originally didn't even call it the theremin; he called it the etherphone. So
That's easy to say, etherphone.
yeah, honestly, it makes it sound way more paranormal.
Oh, yeah, I
than
guess it
the
does.
theremin.
I didn't even think of that. Like, okay, let's geek out. We'll call it the etherphone when we come up with one for ghost hunting. All right, sorry, go ahead. Just mind is like wheels are spinning.
Right, and that's honestly, if considering they don't seem to make the model of the theremin you would like,
Yeah,
it more make our own and we're call it the etherphone.
etherphone theremin. Got
There
it.
you go. It's an interesting device. It works with two antennas, as Dr. Sussman, talked about in the video, or Professor Sussman talked about in the video. And it works with using our own EMF field. So it has the same effect as like when you were a little kid and you had the plasma ball where you put your hand on the glass and the little purple lightning, touches your fingers and you get that connection. It shows that connection. And it's the same technical work as far as how you're using a theremin is you're brushing your EMF field that we can't visibly see that connection like you do with the plasma ball against the field that is being created by the antenna on the theremin, similar to our REM pods.
Okay, and this is kind of where my idea came in. So with this whole let's replace a REM pod idea, I think I really wanted to let the listeners know, like, what the hell this thing is actually capable of doing. So you play it by not touching it, and there's going to be a blog post for this. There's going to have to be, because the amount of like audio that we're going to be adding into this episode for us, it really doesn't do a whole lot of justice until you go back to the blog post, because I will be putting, obviously those YouTube videos embedded into the blog post. So listeners, obviously, make sure you're heading over to storiesinthecemetery.com. The link will be in the show notes. But at any rate, like, this is a beautiful instrument. When it's played properly, and I want you to think of kind of like the essence of the way a harp player looks and reacts to their instrument when they're playing it properly and giving you that wow, this is an elegant piece of machinery. And again, him coming up with this idea to have an instrument that uses EMF field and the parameters to be next to it is absolutely fascinating. To kind of show what our listeners, which they're all paranormal listeners, well, most of them, I'm guessing. So I'm going to play basically a song here that was played on a theremin that we should all recognize just by what we actually get into. So let's get into this song. It's about 2 minutes, another 2-minute little interlude, so to speak. But I wanted to really show off what this instrument can do. All right, so we're back, and obviously you all recognize that from Nightmare Before Christmas. And again, there will be a link in the show notes to the actual video, but if you want to kind of get all the details of like what this device, I hate calling it a device because it is an instrument. I mean, Josh, we're both musicians. We should respect that there's a weird instrument. We're just kind of tying it into ghost hunting. But Josh also has some information about like what the interaction is truly about, with using this instrument and playing it in the right way. So, Josh, what was that term again that you talked about in between?
So it's called heterodyning. Basically, in science words, you create half of a capacitor with the theremin. Now, this is something that usually is done within an actual electrical device on its own without any interference. And because it's an interaction between you and the instrument, it now becomes a completely different interaction for capacitor because you are playing a part of that capacitor. So they gave the term the name heterodyning. Basically, it's just the term for you entering the EMF field of the theremin with your own. So It's the two fields mixing, and they decided to give it its own proper scientific name.
So it's almost like, we all have our favorite guitar player where, it looks like you can't picture that player without their guitar, because they are a part of that person, and that's how I kind of think of the theremin as an instrument. And folks, I know we're talking a lot about like music and instrumentation, but obviously we've said some words that you should have recognized already with EM fields. And I mean, the spectra diving or whatever the hell the term was that Josh brought up. Obviously, that to me, it's almost like you're becoming one with the instrument, and that's fascinating to me. And with this whole process of using one hand for volume and the other for notation, if you watch some videos on theremin players, it almost looks like they are using the same, I guess, chord coordination that a guitar player would use on the neck of a guitar, because their EM field changes as they move specific fingers in specific directions. So,
and honestly, what you said earlier about like a harp player is spot on, because it looks like someone playing a harp in a different position. Like their hands are just in a different orientation.
Oh, it's almost like a perfect air guitarist. You know what I mean? Because they're not touching the actual instrument. Those chord coordinations with their fingers. I hate to say fingerings because it just doesn't sound right on the air. But those chord coordinations, they look like guitar chords, like on the neck of a guitar to me. So again, it's still a fascinating concept that we as humans alive can interact with this instrument as long as it's plugged in. And that's fascinating. Again, I keep using that word because there's no other word for it. And to watch some of the videos that I was watching when I first started diving into this idea, it was awe-inspiring to think, like, okay, as a musician, this is awesome. Like, I love this idea. But now I'm a full-time ghost hunter, paranormal researcher. How can I use this in the field? And, I brought up this idea to very few paranormal researchers because it does seem very, very far-fetched, because technically we need two hands in order to play it. So, and Josh, have you seen anything other than a two-handed theremin?
Well, so that brings up the exact model, I believe, that you found,
right,
where it does not have the volume rod. It just has the pitch. And then that honestly is perfect for the paranormal field, because it's not that far-fetched to think about putting it into an investigation. It's practically a REM pod that plays music. So it's almost exactly a REM pod when you think about it.
Yeah, and the whole reason why I even thought about this is, I mean, don't get me wrong, I love a good REM pod. They give us some great information, some great yes/no answers. But what if, because we all love the sound of REM pods and any kind of REM device, it is that most annoying as shit sound, and it might almost deter a ghost from wanting to come near it. So my process in this was to think of a way how could we find, because a lot of times we're dealing with ghosts from the 17, 18, and early 1900s. And music is always that inspiration to be able to fix a communication or to, I guess, alleviate a conflict, things of that nature. So that's where my process came into play. So before we really dive into this, I'm going to stop us here for a quick sponsor break. And when we come back, we're going to dive into what are the possibilities of getting a theremin to actually work in the paranormal field and what some of the things are that we need to probably look out for when we're looking at theremins. So quick sponsor break.
Hey bearded ghost hunters, are you taking care of your beard with all natural products? The Magnanimous Beard Superstore has everything you need from beard oils, shampoos, beard butter, beard balm, and so much more. You can have any of their products scented with one of their amazing 45 scents. Head over to www.yourbeardsuperstore.com and use code GHOST at checkout to receive $5 off your order. Both Nick and Josh use these products daily, and our beards look and feel great and smell great too. Head over to yourbeardsuperstore.com and use code GHOST for your discount on these magnanimous products. You won't be disappointed. If you have a white or silver beard, they even have specialized products that will help keep the coloring of your beard. Use code GHOST at yourbeardsuperstore.com. This ad is Zeus approved.
And we're back. Thanks, guys, for allowing us to put sponsors in the show. And if you're not using Magnanimous Beard products, damn it, you should be. I love them. Anyway, back to the show. So, guys, let's talk about how we can put this theremin into paranormal investigations. So, obviously, Josh has already mentioned that we could probably replace the REM pod, on a scientific sense, because it does have a no-touch, type of sensitivity to it. And, my purpose for wanting to do this is to get away from everything being so sciencey and geeky and blinky light and, wrong answer sounds, kind of thing, that kind of BS. And let's put something out there. Wow. Music to my ears. It was almost like perfect cue. Like, let's make some music. Like the winds blow. Oh, that's staying in the show. So with that, and Josh's ringtone coming through, that I want music to be able to fix any kind of problem we might actually have with spirit. So, Josh, what kind of range do you think a theremin actually has after watching some of these videos? Like, what do you think we could expect out of it?
We're looking at a minimum of a few inches. Like, we're really not looking at the range or the bubble that a REM pod creates.
Okay.
We're looking at maybe half that size, I'm thinking. Because a REM pod can create itself like almost a full bubble around it, to where 4 to 5 inches out, you're able to kind of start interacting with that field. And the theremin, from the videos, it looks like you have to get much closer. I'm thinking 2 to 3 inches at best.
Wow.
And honestly, it makes it a more sensitive instrument as far as it being used in the paranormal field. And the concept of having a ghost interact with it, in response to music is interesting, especially because you're honestly giving the ghost a hell of a challenge, as most musicians actually talk about a theremin as one of the most difficult instruments to play.
Okay. It's not fair to say to be able to walk around a location with a theremin in hand. Because
Correct. It would constantly make noise.
Yeah, so it's going to interact not only with your movement, but if you're holding it close to body, it's going to pick up from our EM field and make noise. There's a couple of versions of this, listeners, that I think if you're going to dive into this theory and topic, if you're going to look up theremin and just Google it, or even eBay it, Amazon it, you're going to come across a guitar pedal probably more often than not. What you're looking for is it's a pretty long, it almost looks like
It looks like an old radio. Like, it looks like an old radio receiver box.
Yeah, and it's got one antenna coming out the long end side of it, and then one going up. So one is for volume, one is for pitch. And they've created singular antenna. So they've taken out the volume, like Josh said earlier, and it's only pitch. And there's a couple of like little DIY, build it yourself type kits, but those are made out of cardboard. So for the paranormal field, I think that would be fine if you're going to test the theory. I think they're like $20. But there's another one that's a little on the, I don't want to say cheaper scale of what a theremin normally costs, but it does have two antennas, one for volume, one for pitch. But it's pretty small and it's compact. I just don't know that the quality of the item actually is, and there's a lot of settings on there. So I would want something as basic as possible. And what I was looking at when I got excited about this was there's a company called Burns Theremins, and they created one that was first off battery powered, which we all paranormal investigators love battery powered objects instead of having to plug it in. So that was great, number one. And two, it was a singular antenna for pitch only. And third, it also had a built-in speaker. Any other theremin is going to need to be plugged into some type of amplifier, or I'm even thinking like an old pig nose amp. I'm probably dating myself when I say pig nose amp. But there's also like the honey amps right now that are pretty popular when you're building a portal. So my brain right now is going to, what if, because you do need a close proximity for that one antenna for it to make any noise, is that you set up the device, I don't want to say in an empty room because we've already done that episode, but you set it up in a room and you get a long enough cable to go to one of those honey amps or a pig nose amp and set it up in a different location to see if it makes any, and stay away from it. Like human interaction has to absolutely be either outside the room or on the opposite side of the room to be able to listen to the amp to see if you get any kind of interaction with it in that fashion. And that's the way I'm thinking about this. I mean, is that something feasible, or should I change up this idea, Josh? What are your thoughts?
It's not a bad idea. I don't think you need to keep that much distance from the theremin for it to work properly. And I would consider using an EMF meter in a almost like a mount, just a regular like K2, and have it set up next to the theremin. So when there is an interaction, you can coordinate it with an EMF field to show that, yeah, we're getting some kind of noise, but we're also getting an actual spike in field.
I mean, I see where you're going with you got to coordinate and you have to have more than one device, because that's always, a huge tactic of mine to verify. But I think, like, I know you're thinking on the scientific sense to get it to work, but I think my thought process is the humanity of the ghost. And I know that sounds like an oxymoron, but I want the spirits to be comfortable to be able to use that one antenna and get close to it. Like, hey, what's this? There's nobody around. I see a cable and a metal antenna if they know what that is. So let them interact with it in the fashion that they want to. And maybe if they can see that it plays music if they get close to it and they know how to manipulate their own EM field, maybe they can give us a little bit of a melody to kind of coordinate a little bit of friendliness. And that's kind of really what I'm after with this whole process of a theremin in general. Let's get away from, the REM pod of looking like, hey, come close to my device, kind of mentality. And let's, hey, can you play us a little bit of a ditty, and maybe even have a keyboard nearby to maybe get them to mimic it if you can, get some intelligent response that way. So what are your thoughts on that?
That's not a bad idea. And honestly, it would almost become like part of like how your tour is. Hey, this is a theremin. This is how you use it. Like, this is how you, make the different tones and change the pitch. Can you play me a tune from your time era?
Mm-hmm.
And the whole like have a keyboard or something nearby. There's 1,000 apps you could do on your phone where you can pull up a keyboard and play a note or a melody.
So this call and response, I mean, it could be fascinating. I mean, you got some type of EM field reader nearby. I'm thinking put the theremin in the middle of a room and cable it out to some kind of amp away from it, and obviously put some type of night vision or IR camera on it to monitor everything. So when it does go off, you see how high the millimeter or K2 meter went. Again, this all goes back to our empty room theory of maybe the spirit doesn't want to talk to us in so many words of communication or English, or maybe they're not even from here, and they don't speak the language very well and don't understand our dialect and tone. That's where things can come across a little harsh at times. So music is always that perfect communication of, hey, you play the beginning of For Release, which is pretty common, to anybody really, depending on how far back they go, and they can play back the next note. Even like getting that one note to come out of it would be something astonishing, I would think, like just to get them to finish the melody. I would be fascinated to find that kind of interaction.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I mean, if we really look at this is similar to how most of our devices in the field actually work, is by creating a EM field and then having something interact with it. By turning it into, or by kind of going back into a musical instrument, it does bring back like that humanity part that you're talking about, and give them something that's a little more familiar, even though it's not a familiar item. It proposes an interaction that's more comfortable in some sense of the word.
Yeah, and that's, what I teach on the tours is that ghost hunting, which I still hate using that phrase, is not scary. Like, I know we love the thrill. I know that we, love the anticipation, and maybe even some of us thrive for that fear, because we all love a good scary movie, and we watch it. We know we're going to be scared, but we love the anxiety of we're about to be scared. And when you get that interaction of you're getting keyword terms through a spirit box, or you have things that are interacting with each other. You caught something on a thermal and on your millimeter at the same time, and you can see like, oh, that correlates, that works well. For us to be able to put the humanity back into this and realize that these spirits were freaking people, and we need to show some respect. And there's a reason why we're looking for them. We want to learn their story, we want to interact with them, and we want to understand them. And I think music is one of those concepts that, when we put that time capsule out into space, there's something of Beethoven. I can't remember what's on there, but it's a common piece that kind of helps explain our humanity a little bit. We love peace and tranquility. It is something we all strive for, whether we want to admit it or not. So why wouldn't we do that with spirit instead of charging into a room, is anybody here? Kind of bullshit that we see on TV. And that's really why I think I wanted to get into this, is because music was such a big part of my life. And I know how it interacted with me when I was in that world. And why wouldn't I try to use that in the paranormal field?
Yeah, I think this would be a really interesting interaction when dealing with a spirit inside some kind of space where there's a possibility of interacting with an actual musician, because you're bringing something in that gives them a sense of who they were, and kind of like it's nostalgic in a way. Like it might not be an instrument they're familiar with or something even close to what they actually play, but music is music to a musician, and they know a note when they hear a note, so they know how to, or what you're going for. So there's a familiarity there that would actually improve a interaction and almost cause like the trigger object kind of effect.
That's where I was going next.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely a trigger object. And I don't know if you saw it or not, but there was an episode of Ghost Hunters where Grant actually brought in, I can't remember if it was Ghost Hunters, it might have been his other show, but he brought in a whole orchestra into this theater. And they actually had like humming and other interactions in the seats and around the theater while the orchestra was playing. And it's, again, like you said, I was going to say trigger object, when you brought up like, hey, if our spirit is a musician, this could definitely be a trigger for sure. But I'm thinking on a much bigger scale of more broad. Like I'm looking at the macro of it, saying we all understand music. Everybody likes some type of music. So why not try to bring that into an interaction, with the spirit world? Just by playing something they would recognize either from their era or even from before their era, because obviously if it was popular in the 1700s, it's probably going to be popular in the 1800s. So it just depends on the piece of music. But I see where you're going, looking at the micro of it, saying if we have a musician and they recognize an instrument that can play notes, they know notes, and if they can manipulate their own EM field to be able to put their hand to the antenna, voila, we have interaction for them trying to complete the note. It might not be perfect, but they might even have to figure it out. Just fascinating to me that we could have that type of interaction where they might not be able to speak to us, but they might be able to play music to us to kind of show where they're at. So, a couple of extra things about this that I kind of wanted to bring up just based off of people diving into this, because I think we stirred the pot a little bit, at least getting the wheel spinning on a lot of possibilities of what this thing actually is, what does it look like, and where can I get one? I want to show Nick and Josh that this is an actual thing that they came up with, and we're going to use it on our team. Theremins, first off, a full-blown 2 antenna, 1 loop antenna for volume and 1 for pitch. They're not exactly inexpensive. So you can expect anywhere between like the $200 to $600 range, and then they scale up from there. So they're not easy to come by, first off. Anything less than that. There's those kind of toy compact ones that I brought up earlier. Those run between $40 to $55, and you can usually find those on Amazon or eBay. But that burns theremin with the singular antenna with all the great features that I talked about. I reached out to them and I told them what I wanted it for. And their website still says sold out. But they did respond with they're no longer in production. And I believe I'm on a mailing list of some sort that if they ever start putting them back in production, that I would be notified. But it was the perfect price, too, because I think they were only like $88 or $89, somewhere in that bracket, which is right in line with, what a paranormal researcher wants to spend on one piece of equipment to experiment with. But I like your idea of the tour thing, me putting that on the tour. So it might be me picking up that compact, like $50 one to see if I can experiment with it on the tour to kind of see how it works and interacts with the guests.
Yeah, I think it'd be really interesting to see how it also interacts with a normal EMF field. Like, is this a device that's going to react to, an EMF field that you come into contact with? So if like, oh, well, next to this pole or this power line, there's a really high EMF. Is the theremin going to react to that? Is it going, because in theory it should.
But this also goes to the EM mic theory that you could hear what EM fields sound like. I've spoken to you about the Pinckney Mansion site before, and even on tonight's tour, I mean, we had the highest reading was 85 milligauss.
Wow.
I mean, and it was like 85 and then like down to 3. Like these weren't like trickling around coming from transformers nearby or anything like that. So how would the theremin react to that, and what do those notes sound like? So
yeah,
to the theory of the EM, like do we have a different concept of what the EM field sounds like? Instead of just hearing the buzzing or whirring sound of it, can we actually get a melody out of it?
Yeah, also brings into the whole, like, do you need to put it on something, or can you just set it on the ground? Is this one of those situations where you need to get like one of those pop seats, that people buy, where they can just, set up a stool chair anywhere?
So I've seen some stands for it where it's like a stick stand, pretty thin. Of course, I got to think of my gear bag too.
Right.
There's that thing's already close to 40 pounds with the gear I'm carrying around. Not to mention, I don't think there's any room left. I'm literally using every tiny pocket I can think of out of that bag. There are stands. I've seen them for like the smaller, 2 antenna plug-in theremins. But what I think I like about the little compact $50 one is that it's rechargeable. Like it has a C port to charge it. So that is ideal. So it doesn't need batteries or plugged in. You just charge it, which is fascinating. That's a great idea for me. as far as the tour goes. So it might be something I experiment with and bring to the tour, but trying to bring new concepts to, the muggles that come to visit me isn't always the best, I guess, thought process. The EM mic is fascinating to
Right.
some people, but boring for others. And if they've never seen it on TV before from their favorite paranormal TV shows or from their favorite YouTubers, they're kind of like, where is he going with this? So again, it might be something I go and test on my own with some very haunted locations that I know have some pretty high activity around certain dates, and kind of test it to kind of see where it goes. But I think getting it firsthand would that little guy first while I'm waiting on the Burns model would probably be the best bet at this point. I just want to hear what an EMF sings like instead of what it sounds like. What is it singing? Do we get a tone?
True.
Yeah, how cool would that be if it actually brought out started singing Bon Jovi's Dead or Alive or some shit? That would crack me up if we started hearing some craziness come out of that. But there's got to be a reason why certain musicians have actually gotten into this instrument so much. It is an odd instrument. It's not something that you can find easily, and I don't see any concerts traveling around my city that I'm a theremin player and I'm going to be here, buy tickets now kind of thing. So it's got to be pretty rare to find somebody that can play this.
Yeah, well, like I said, most musicians say that this is one of the most difficult instruments to play, and it's because of how technical it is, and it's because there's not a string that you have to hit in a certain place between certain frets. There's not a specific place you hit on a drum. There's not, there's no visible keys. You have nothing to go off of except for pure muscle memory once you figure out where a note is.
And it's also, like you said, using one of those pop stick stands. They have to memorize, have almost like a memory lock on how high the stand has to be. Because if you're going to raise your hand 3 inches, that's great. But if you go up 4 inches, that's a whole different note. That's a whole different key. It's very interesting to think of how hard it would have to be to learn how to play this thing. It's almost like picking up a set of bagpipes and figuring that out. It's going to be annoying as hell for a newbie. But if you've been playing most of your life, a set of bagpipes can be a gorgeous sound to hear. So that's kind of how I think of this instrument. It's way elegant, to just pick it up and learn how to play it, especially at my age. That's not something I'm looking to do. Drums was hard enough. But I think on that note, I think we've covered quite a bit on this. It's not a topic that has a lot of, I guess, meat on the bone. So it's still just a theory. And obviously, if I, pick up one of these little guys, or I can get, Burns theremins to start, making the one that I want, it's obviously going to be an experimentation. But it might also be, if I can get the little guy to work, that I take it to that concept of adding that little honey amp, to kind of see if that concept will work. That's an interesting theory. And again, I love how we get our wheels spinning as we're just sitting here, just, talking about, hey, this could be a good idea. And all of a sudden we've got this grand master scheme where we can set up amps and walk out of the room and get them to play notes back to us. But when I said earlier that there were musicians that used to play this, so I think I sent you the video, but did you know that Jimmy Page from Led Zeppelin was one of the first rock stars to actually bring this thing to a little bit of, I guess, the spotlight is the word I'm looking for here. So I guess to end this episode, I am going to play the audio clip of Jimmy Page playing a theremin live as he is finding the notes from Robert Plant's singing. And Robert Plant, it's almost like a call and answer type of video. So, of course, this will be on the blog post as well. So, Josh, do you have any final notes?
Just as a final note, I know there's a lot of paranormal teams out there that build equipment.
Yes.
I would love to get a hold of somebody who thinks they can put one of these together. So, if there's anybody out there that would like to, I would love if they would reach out.
and we're not talking like you've created a music box, like some of the REM pod, little cranky, it goes off with a few little tunes. Like we want a full-blown theremin. So if you can pick up one of the cheap ones and I guess master it backwards to learn how it works and have the notes in there properly, that would be fascinating. So I will have all of the links of the things that we talked about between the Burns theremin, all the audio clips that were put into this episode, and then, of course, the blog post link for storiesinthecemetery.com. But, Josh, I'm with you, man. If somebody wants to build us this shit, let's take it to another level and kind of see what we can do. But this has been the 56th episode of the Stories in the Cemetery podcast. I'm going to end with Jimmy Page. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate you.
Let's see you on the next story.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Stories in the Cemetery podcast. You can follow your host, Nicholas McGurr, on most social media platforms under the name Stories in the Cemetery. If you'd like to follow co-host Joshua Amen, you'll find him under the name Amen Paranormal Research. Be sure to check out the show notes for any links to specific articles written by your hosts and all the references used to create this episode. Happy hunting. We'll see you on the next episode of the Stories in the Cemetery podcast.